On today's World Insight, a herd of wayward elephants in China's southern Yunnan province, an attention-grabbing sensation. But beyond the headlines, what does the herd mean for wildlife protection efforts? And China's commitment to carbon peaking in 2030 and carbon neutrality in 2060. The best way to do it? An environmentalist talks about the big data that lays the groundwork for the massive green effort.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Not all who wander are lost. A herd of wild Asian elephants have left their forest home in China's Xishuangbanna National Nature Reserve and have been marching north, delighting social media, eating and trampling crops, and causing more than $1 million worth of damage. Authorities have blocked traffic on roads while the elephants crossed and were setting up barriers and using food as bait to try to keep them away from Kunming and other populated areas to keep both the elephants and humans safe. How should we understand the global sensation this story has created, and how can we help to bring these elephants home? For biodiversity and wild elephant migration in Beijing, Dr. Zhu Chunquan, the China head of Global Platform for Public Goods with World Economic Forum. In Xishuangbanna, we're very glad to be joined by Himsa Campos Axis, who is a principal investigator at the Xishuangbanna Tropical Botanical Garden, who specializes in elephant. Good to see you, sir. And Professor, he is also at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. In Beijing, last but not least, Yi Yangshen, Senior Energy Consultant of Asian Development Bank. I want to start by go to you, Ahimsa, because you've been doing elephant research for 2 decades, and you are following the latest story regarding this herd of 15 elephants. Tell me more about how you see the latest development.
What we are seeing here is a group of elephants dispersing away from the natural home range. So I think it's important to understand this is not a migration episode. And I know people are talking about migration, but we are not aware of any migration behavior among Asian elephants nowadays. This is a bit different. This is a dispersal behavior. This is when animals leave the home and they go somewhere else that they don't know. So then these elephants decide to leave the home for some reason, but they don't know exactly where they're going. They're not looking for a particular place. They're looking for a suitable environment to establish and maybe create a new environment, a new home range, or maybe eventually try to come back to the place. So dispersal is normal, and that happens not very frequently, but it's part of the expected behavior of elephants. Mm-hmm. But what is very unusual in this case, that these elephants went so far, and they were outside of the recent historical range of elephants, going into new climatic zones and going into very different environmental conditions, and of course going into these high human density areas close to Kunming and some other towns. Mm-hmm. So then it's very exceptional, but we need to understand that it's part of the behavior of elephants.
What was it like, for you to first learn that they have left their natural habitat, because this whatever you call the disperse phenomenon happened from last March?
I first heard about this group back in November when they were in Mojiang, and it was fascinating at that time. At that time, it was already very interesting. They were about 100 kilometers away from the regular range. Mm-hmm. And it clearly opened the question on why they're doing this. And I think we will see more of these things, maybe not as extreme, not elephants going 500 kilometers, but elephants going 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers. This is going to be happening in the near future. So then I think these elephants have been a kind of a wake-up call, saying, hey, this is happening right now for a number of circumstances that we can discuss if you want. Mm-hmm. But so then the extreme case can be a good example for us to understand the general trends.
These elephants seems to be taking their time. There are a lot of human interest stories, or should I say element interest stories going on social media about the elephants drinking the alcohol and having a big nap and opening the tap of the water and try to water the whole herd's members and also try to save the small elephants from dropping into the ditches. One after another, it seems that there's a very up close human observation of how smart, in fact, this large mammal is, the elephant.
Yeah. Elephants are extremely intelligent. Always surprising to observe them because you realize how many common elements they have with human behavior. So in many ways, they are social animals. They have affect for each other. They really care in ways that we don't think of many animals having that kind of relationships. So when people observe them and we observe them kind of solving problems or even being silly, because elephants make many silly things, even make many bad decisions.
Yes.
I think that attracts people interest. In Sri Lanka, people say that watching kids and watching elephants, you never get bored. And I think all this media attention is kind of bringing people close to elephant behavior, which I think is a very good thing in the long term because people realize that elephants are an important part of China's natural heritage. And it's a very, very interesting thing having this population in Yunnan. And I think conservation efforts are very worthwhile, and I hope this will help to promote the elephant conservation cause.
You are now working in one of those natural conservation areas in Xishuangbaina, Ahimsa. So I understand back in the 1970s, the wild Asian elephant, that is the name, has already been put on the top list of endangered species. That time, 170 of them. Now, according to the latest number I could get access to, it's about 300 to 400 wild Asian elephants. Now, could you help us to understand what has happened, Ahimsa, over the past 3 decades, 4 decades, in terms of human activities, its interaction with the wild elephants? Let's just say in Yunnan, Xishuangbaina, first of all.
Maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, elephants were very widespread in China. Up north, up to Beijing, there were elephants. So in all these millennia, elephants have been retrieving and going to smaller areas. So 200 years ago, there were elephants left in Guangdong and Guangxi and Yunnan. In the 20th century, the population became very small. So as you say, by the 1970s, they were restricted to southwest Yunnan. By the 1990s, they were limited to very small areas, very, very small, a nature reserve called Mongyang here in Xishuangbaina, and some border areas with Myanmar and with Laos. But then several things happened. We're dealing with very complex system. But something very important happened is that elephants became protected, and they were protected on paper, but also in reality. So since the mid-1990s, elephants began to increase in numbers, but also expand geographically from these small areas that have been coming out and going out. So then elephants became protected. By being protected, they were breeding and they were beginning to increase in numbers. As they increased in numbers, they began to go to new areas and they found it was safe. So then they realized that they could go to places that maybe 20, 30 years ago would have been dangerous for them. So they began to go more into human-dominated landscapes. And what happens there is that there is a lot of food for elephants. Elephants love our crops. So they found a huge amount of food, and then they lost fear and continue to expand. So what we have now is a growing population. This is very good. We want the elephant population to increase. But of course, this comes with some side effects. So I think what we have is that conservation is working. I think the ecological civilization is happening. At least for elephants, things are much better now than they were 40 years ago. And I will claim that there is no safest country for an Asian elephant than China.
Do you see the habits, the living standards, and also the interactions among the herds of wild Asian elephants have been changing at all?
The elephants living in Xishuangbaina, I think they lost fear. Before, elephants used to be very scared of people, and they will avoid coming close to people because it was dangerous for them. But now it's not really dangerous. So then they learn that because elephants, their behavior is very flexible and they can learn. So once they learned it was safe, And also they learned that there's plenty of food outside. They went out from the natural habitats and then they began to consume these crops. And what I can tell you from a biological point of view is that these elephants in general, they are very well fed. So the body condition is very healthy. The condition is good.
Yeah.
They have many babies, which indicates that they are doing very well physiologically. And then the geographical expansion means that the conditions are being favorable for them.
Right.
So then they change their behavior by being less shy and not avoiding people as much as they used to do before.
Right. We noticed this herd of elephants. Quite a number of big elephants, grown-ups, but there are smaller elephants. There are leading elephants. There are also male elephants that are trying to accompany the whole herd. How does that work?
Let me just describe basically what is an elephant, okay? An elephant is a very big animal whose life is basically finding food and once in a while finding mates. But because elephants have not natural enemies or no natural predators, all the life is just finding food, which is a very difficult task. So when elephants are in a natural environment, particularly in a tropical rainforest, they don't find much food. So to find food, they have to move every day over big areas, and they have to make a strong effort and eat many different things to fulfill the diet. So then an adult elephant might consume maybe 150 to 100 kilograms of wild plant material every day.
I see.
But when elephants can consume crops, like rice or corn, they could get the calories much faster. So maybe they can consume all the calories, let's say in 6 hours or 8 hours. In the wild, they might spend 17 hours a day feeding.
I see.
So in these elephants that are eating crops, they have more free time to do other things. The way they travel, what we don't know, and that's one of the things that really fascinate me is the navigation skills. We don't know how they can identify the areas, but we know they are very good at navigating. We suspect they have some kind of mental map of the places they know.
Oh, I see.
So in most cases, they can go over long distances and they will know how to come back. The herd that has gone north, they don't know that environment. They left the natural, any memory they could have was lost maybe around May last year. So then for the last year, they have been moving in areas that they don't know. They don't know where they're going. And I suspect they will not be able to find a way back if they try to do. I think they will have to find a new place to establish. And the way they move, there's always the older individuals in the group, the old females, are the ones that will lead the movement. And then they will have to adjust the speed to whatever the babies can follow. The baby are the limiting factor.
Yes.
The babies cannot walk too fast, so the family will have to adjust to the movement of the babies. And the males, the big males, they don't belong to the family. They might join sometimes, but they normally move separately. So what we see is a family of elephants moving around looking for a place to establish.
Yeah. So you see the different roles of male and then females in this herd?
Elephants are a matriarch-based society. So what you have is the grandmothers living with the mothers and aunties and living with the daughters and the sons. So then these are the ones who will be making the decisions and leading the group.
Now I want you to be joined by two other guests. Of course, we introduced earlier Zhu Chunchuan and Yi Yangshen. How do you see, this story become such a global phenomenon? The story of 15 elephants, this small herd. Were you surprised? Himself, for example, as someone who's been dealing with elephants for decades.
Partially. So I know that people love this kind of animal stories. Then, especially when it's something very exceptional, like seeing the lion or these kind of things, become big media attractions. So then I think we need to understand that we don't want this to die after a few days of news. We want this kind of interest to somehow have an impact on how people understand conservation and what people think about living with wildlife. And this is a fascinating story, so I can understand that makes good news. It makes very good news.
Mr. Shen, what about that? It seems that the whole country is dazzled by these elephants.
I think this is good that, people pay attention on this wild animal. That also shows that, people love those animals. So I hope they will, in their adventure, they will find new home, or as the expert saying, we will have a bigger, natural reserve zones for them.
But one of the things we need to bear in mind, Dr. Zhu, is that it is because human protection, for example, this time the herd, all the counties and the rural areas that made their trip to actually have been purposefully preparing food for them and making sure that they have their corridor to walk around without hurting human beings and making sure they have a sustainable way forward. How do you see these kinds of human efforts? On the one hand, it's certainly applaudable to protect animals, but on the other hand, how to set the boundaries of human activities and interactions with wild animals?
In the past decades, the significant increase of the general public of wildlife conservation in China, I think that's very positive. And the second, I think, is people live like elephant and also animals. That's also reflects the awareness of the general public. I think that's also positive. But I think this, will be good if leave the animals alone and follow their nature, features and the biological behaviors.
Ahimsa, you were talking about this, the so-called side effect, right? That the elephants are now more free-spirited because they don't think they're likely to be hurt as a result of protection measures coming in the human society. And they also could have easier access to food because humans, in a way, want to prepare some food for them. So how do you see efforts like this from the conservationist perspective?
Well, my message here will be that we are dealing with a very complex system, very complex problem, and that elephants are very dangerous and are very difficult to live with. So I will suggest that the individuals in the public will not try to take action, definitely not bringing food to elephants, and then let the authorities work, which I think the authorities have more information, they're doing a good job, and I think it's much better not to have too many people trying to intervene because that can backfire. So, and I think what I would suggest the public is to observe, to reflect about our relationship with wildlife, and I think very importantly, our future with wildlife. So for me, these elephants are telling us what could be the future, not now, but in 20 years, in 50 years, what kind of human-wildlife interactions we want to have in highly developed landscapes where we might be having leopards and elephants and a lot of wildlife if we do a good job, but being together also brings problems, okay? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to understand that it is complex and there will be problems and it's not so easy to solve. Good intentions are not enough. So then for the general public, it's better to step aside and observe and let authorities do their work.
Ahimsa, what you said reminds me of a scenario. What we have right now, one would assume is much better than a scenario where you have 15 snow leopards running around, right? That they're going to hurt human beings as a result of that. So we're having a milder version of scenario in which we are so close to wild animals. And this is a test and a reminder of what we are likely to do in the near future. Do you think there are clear things that we need to do and need to follow right now? Do we have that experience? Do we have a whole set of measures that everybody can follow?
My advice would be follow the instructions that you get from the authorities. For example, we're trying to identify what kind of situations lead to high risk of accident. So if you have elephants in your neighborhood, don't walk alone at night in the forest because you know it's dangerous. Watch out for the warning information. If your local forestry bureau is telling you there are elephants this night in this area, maybe you should be careful. So then I think the main thing for individuals is to understand that there is a risk and that is complex, and then solutions will involve a lot of interaction, and it's better to let the authorities to lead in this process and kind of let them communicate the local context.
And finally, before we go, I do want to have every one of you, the three of you, because you volunteered to be in this panel, and I really appreciate that. Tell me more about why you love elephant and why you love this story that we are discussing together with. Mr. Zhu, briefly.
Yeah, okay. I think this is really a unique opportunity for the public education and how to learn from this movement of the elephant and how to find the future way, how to harmony with wildlife. I think there are some very good methodology and do systematic conservation planning, how to living with elephant and other tiger and tiger. And I think the biggest challenge in the future is the human-wildlife conflict. And as long as this great effort for the nature conservation and also to promote the eco-civilization in China.
Mr. Shen?
Well, I think although we have some security issue when we approaching these wild elephants, but on the other hand, I do see the progress in China for protecting the wild animal and ecosystem. I hope in other developing countries, this can be also the trend.
And finally, Ahimsa?
I can tell you, back in 2005, I was in the forest in Sri Lanka, and I was doing my master, and I had this moment of understanding in which I understood that we wanted to protect forests to conserve elephants. But I also understood that we wanted to protect elephants to conserve the forest. And this means that elephants are an ecological agent. They do things in the ecosystem. So then elephants are not just things that we conserve in isolation. We conserve them as part of a system. And when elephants disappear, that system suffers. So then I became very fascinated by the idea that elephants really help to protect ecosystems. So that was my motivation to pursue a career in elephant conservation. And if I can briefly follow on what Dr. Chu was saying, when our conservation efforts are successful, we'll have more elephants, more tigers, more leopards, and this will bring conflict with people. So human-wildlife conflict is going to be a really, really important topic. And as you know, this year, there is the COP15 meeting in Kunming, where human-wildlife conflicts are coming into the agenda formally as part of one of the targets. So that's very important to understand. Conservation will bring some side effects, and we need to bring science to deal with these side effects.
Yeah. Well, listening to all of you talk about this, I'm becoming even more interested in what's going to happen the next time or next stage of this whole story, this herd of 15 elephants. We know that they are turning from north to northwest and likely to further turn. Maybe they're going back to their natural habitat. Maybe they're going to settle somewhere else. We do not know. We certainly wish them good luck, and everyone that's been interacting with them along the way, living in the area, also good luck. As they say, love would even draw an elephant through a door keyhole. I hope our love for the wild animals will eventually bring more harmony between human beings and wildlife. Thank you so much for the three of you for your wonderful contribution. And you're watching World Insight. Coming up, China's commitment to carbon peaking in 2030 and carbon neutrality in 2060. The best way to do it? An environmentalist talks about the big data that lays the groundwork for the massive green effort. I'm standing here in a bustling intersection of a big metropolis during the rush hour. As the economies grow and people's lifestyle change, we are contributing ever more to the greenhouse gas emissions. As the economies grow and people's lifestyles change, they contribute to rising greenhouse gas emissions. No wonder global carbon dioxide emissions was about 34 billion tons in 2020. China was one of the biggest emitters, accounting for 27%. Now the country is on track to deliver on commitment of peaking carbon emissions by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. While the world is watching China's strategy to achieve its green goals, it's crucial to find reliable data in drawing up an action plan. The key is to find who the emitters are, how much greenhouse gas emissions they belch out, and then find an applicable rule. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey to find the real answers. Who's gathering the data and what the numbers mean?
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for showing me around. I want to know your maps. Ma Jun is an insider. He is the director of the Institute of Public and Environment Affairs. The institute collects, collates, and analyzes raw information to build an environmental database, which includes carbon emissions of different places and enterprises in China. When you think about how to do a plan, a roadmap, what are some of the most important factors you need to consider in order to make that plan viable?
I think now we're having a 40-year-long commitment. I think we first need to understand what are the bases. What are the we need to have the data, statistics of the current situation, and then we need to break that 40-year-long commitment into phases and set milestones. Yeah. And then we need to distribute all this mega national commitment to the local regions, provinces and cities. And then we need to distribute that further down to major industries and carbon-intensive emitters. So there are all these things that we have to do.
Where are we now?
We're at the
very
sort of a beginning situation because talking about the data, we're still not clear, how much exactly we actually emit, because there's a difference in all these statistics and also even the methodology of accounting. There's so far not a consensus on that. So first we need to figure that out, and then try to distribute all this to different regions, and that part is still hasn't been done yet.
So China's approach, in your words, is still going to start from the central and top-down approach?
It will be, I hope it will be a combination of both the top-down approach and the bottom-up. Top-down is obviously we have our so-called national condition. This is we have the strength. Yeah. When we try to control the local air pollution control, we go through the top-down, sending tens of thousands of the inspectors across the country, and achieved a lot of results. But on the other hand, now it's with the slowing down of the economy and with the need of recovery, nationally and locally, I think it will be increasingly more difficult to try to rely solely upon the government administrative measures. So we need the other stakeholders to join the efforts. We need to have the especially the market-based solutions.
Yeah. What are these numbers and why are they crucial?
The number that we're compiling is that on the national level, on the provincial, city level, all this carbon emission and carbon and greenhouse gas emission number, and then the data on the energy consumption or different fossil fuel consumption, and then the emission data from the major emitters, from the major corporations. Some of them are super large emitters, so we need to understand. We have millions of them, right. And so we need to figure out their emissions.
China's emission trading system, also known as the National Carbon Market, is expected to be launched soon. It creates the world's largest carbon market, which lays a solid foundation for low-emission transition. Currently, more than 2,000 fossil fuel-powered enterprises have signed up. The basic framework of the new carbon trading system is quality data on emissions. And on that, Ma Jun showed me their blue carbon map at work.
This is the carbon map database that we compiled from the different sources. And on this map, we can see, for example, the city of Beijing. We can allow people to view its emission data from 2005 all the way to 2020. And then we see another real front runner in China, and the Pearl River Delta, the city of Shenzhen, has made
doing pretty good.
Yeah, a lot of progress made on low carbon. So we can see the carbon emission going down in Shenzhen.
So these are the cities that are doing pretty well, right?
Yes.
What about those that are still on their way?
Yeah, we do have those cities, and we do compile their data. Western part of China, and the city of Ordos, with a lot of coal power and energy-intensive industries being relocated there, and you can see the emission data is going up quite rapidly.
Look at that trend.
Yeah, look at this trend, and obviously our energy-intensive industries, our moving inland, are also our coal power base are shifting. And based on all this data, we have developed a carbon peak index. Again, taking Beijing as an example, we can see all this very year-on-year data from 2005 to 2020. Basically, Beijing is on track to peak at this moment. And Shanghai, although its total emission is still quite large, but it's also, we view that as on track. Picked up last year, but in the meantime, we're also feel quite interested that in Shanghai, the city decided to project its peak to 2025. We trust that it can peak probably earlier than that. This is the city of Tangshan, and we can see that the city actually peaked 2014, but ever since then it dipped, but then rebounded. 1 billion tons for the first time. That is more than 60% of the global total output. And Tangshan is the largest steel manufacturer in China.
So you got the cities all mapped up, the locality. What about from the enterprise's perspective?
When it comes to companies, the data is also very important because eventually we need to reduce their emission, but we need to understand the basic carbon footprint. So we started compiling this data, although there's no mandatory compulsory requirements for disclosure. But we're happy to see 5 provinces already started requiring for this disclosure, and we compile those data. And in the meantime, all these blue dots are the other companies that already disclose their data. But when we zoom in, we can also see many orange dots.
Right.
Actually, more orange dots.
What do they stand for?
They stand for the companies that have not yet disclosed their carbon data.
So you know all of them?
We know all of them. We're tracking altogether 8.9 million companies in China.
That's a hell of a data.
A lot of data. We know their name, their geolocation, and their industry, and we also have 2 million records.
Now these data are all voluntary provided?
All this data are coming from 4 major sources. First, the official sources from various ministries, a dozen ministries, and especially from the Ministry of the Environment. And then it also comes from the self-monitoring and reporting by the corporations. And another major motivator is those brands, multinational and local brands, who drive their suppliers to come to us to disclose. And then now increasingly some of the financial institutions still also drive for that. For example, listed companies started to be required to disclose their information.
carbon map shows us both positive and negative data, presenting both opportunities and challenges on the road to carbon neutrality. What exactly needs to be done? What happens to fossil fuel enterprises? And what about the future of millions of people working in these industries?
It's quite clear that the leader of China have expressed that we have heard the concern from the other part of the world, that is the coal power. Our coal power is still growing, and behind that, the carbon footprint is still expanding. I have to put it into historic perspective. From 2000 to 2012, China's coal consumption tripled, more than tripled. But ever since China initiated this Clean Air Action Plan from 2013, the whole coal consumption got stagnated, dipped first, but rebounded over the past 2-3 years. It concerned the other part of the world. It also concerned us, because this is not just going to lead to a growth of our carbon emission, but also it will impact the hard-won achievement of our air pollution control.
Why did we see some progress? Is it due to the merits of the Clean Air Act from the very beginning?
Yeah, this progress is because the emission source from the for both the air pollution, local air pollution, and the carbon emission is coming from mostly the same sources, the fossil fuel and the industrial emission. So by tackling these sources for our clean air action, help to check the vast growth expansion of carbon emission. I think that's we have to keep in mind. It's a huge contribution to the global fight against climate change. Having said that, it's still not enough. We're still burning half of the world's coal. So
why is that?
It's because first, we're still going through this industrialization and urbanization. We're in a different development phase. But to add on that, it's the slowing down of the economy since 2018, and then the trade war, and then the pandemic hit. Of course, there's quite a few local government try to relax their environmental control, and they try to jumpstart their local economy. So we have seen a rebound, and I think that's quite worrisome. So we're actually facing the headwind. After the commitment was made by President Xi last September, there's a whole new dynamic in China, from the central government agencies to local government to the major state-owned enterprises and all the investors and financial institutions in China. They all started to review this situation and make their own political statement. So that's very positive. But with that, we're still facing a headwind.
The 30 million people who has their livelihood related to the coal industry, upswing, downswing. So what does that mean, really, when China wants to say, reduce as much as possible the carbon from the coal industry, from the coal fire plants?
I think this is a transition that we need to manage properly. But we have some good experience. For example, as I mentioned, the vast expansion of the coal power industries have been checked. The coal consumption has been checked for the local air pollution control. The reason is because we obviously value the health, life and health of our people, and air pollution has exposed hundreds of millions of Chinese people to the health risk caused by this. So I think this is what we are considering first, and then we can subsidize the phasing out of this industry, rather than just because otherwise we don't have to put huge, enormous amount of money to try to clean them up, right. But instead of doing that, well, we can use this money to try to cushion the impact on the livelihood of those workers related to this industry.
Some of these coal-powered plants being built, it's likely that they will have to function for more than a decade because of the huge amount of money and investment put into it. So it's hard to imagine that once the picture, as you described, will be suddenly switched off.
There's a real risk that one day, in China, we have to do it for our local, for our domestic reason, or for the global fight against pollution. So those coal power plants, at least they need to function 30 years before they can actually make some.
Even longer than I know.
Yeah, even longer. So that will lead to a lot of the so-called stranded assets, meaning that they will become bad assets. So the bad debt, and those financial institutions who foot all this project gonna suffer from huge losses. So I think the central bank in China and those our financial institutions got quite concerned about this prospect.
Right. That's what I want to ask you. Is there all set standard that everybody would agree upon or accept in China regarding the emissions and regarding the ESGs? Is there something like that?
On the emission side, yes, the Ministry of Environment and Ecology have developed all these across-the-board standards that we all need to comply with.
Yeah.
That has been done, but on the ESG standards for green investment, that part is still being developed and has yet to be accepted by all. I think at this moment we need to develop a scoring index to make sure that everyone will be reviewed in a fairer way. Not just taking into account of their GDP growth, but also taking into account of the quality of their carbon peak.
My talk with environmentalist Ma Jun about the big data behind carbon neutrality and carbon zero. And that's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more Search World Insight, check out our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye.